Only you remember that sometimes you work a bit more because, client demands. That's why you work a bit more and a tiny bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And you see where this is going. Sometimes you wonder, where is the point where we should actually stop? Because maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too much for you. Maybe it's too much because it was never paid by the client or never agreed to do that in the first place. And now the question is, what can you do that this 24/7 availability is not dominating your life? Or should it dominate your life? The question is, do we need to be available 24/7 for our clients? If so, in which circumstances? If not, why not? The main point here is, and now, of course, we first have to look into the problems and challenges, and then we have to see how to do it better. So we live in an always-on society, as you know, with social media, with all channels being available, WhatsApp, Instagram, WhatsApp, Threema, Signal, Telegram, all these messaging services, Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, social media, of course, email, calls, texting. Then you have office managers, different apps, no matter if it's Slack or Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever else you use. There are always ways, Zoom phone now, if some people heard of that, and the UK is already quite present. The always-on society is getting more and more into your life. And the demand is that you're always there. And we know this is impossible. However, we have to deal with the fact that there is a certain demand and we have to deal with it. While at the same time, we have a demand from people with their private lives as well. There is, of course, and that is what you feel when I talk about this, pressure, factual pressure. It is quite astonishing when you see how many leaders talk about that you have to be available. Some people even say that you have to be available. You have to be available 24/7. While at the same time, we know this is not possible. And quite surprisingly, well, actually not surprisingly at all, these leaders never put this into writing because they know that putting this in writing first, it's ridiculous because it's not possible. You can't be available 24/7. And also, in many countries, it's straightforward illegal. And you do not want to make a lawsuit out of it in the first place. So the factual pressure is the one side, but also you have an emotional pressure, which is often even stronger. So you work in a company, you work in an organization where you have, for example, teams, and sometimes you see people like to go the extra mile and another extra mile and a bit more and a bit more. And suddenly you feel that in the organization, you have this pressure that you don't want to be the only person not doing that. You don't want to be the only person not being available. So suddenly you have this emotional pressure, either from society, when you live in a country where working a lot is very much accepted and also lauded. Also, you can see that when you work in an organization where this pressure happens to you, this emotional pressure. Also, maybe just in your team. You can work in an organization where people say, no, we have very regulated working times. However, in your team, people say, well, not in this department. We work a bit more and you have to deal with that. Is that okay with you? And of course, these rhetorical questions never go well. This has countless side effects. And these side effects are not only physical ones, that you get more and more tired, that you see that you don't get enough sleep. It also has social side effects of not seeing your friends and family enough with all the consequences that had. And of course, psychological side effects leading to, for example, being stressed out, burnout syndrome, or even worse. And let's face it, when we look into the factual evidence and just apply common sense, no matter how much you work, when you work 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 or more hours, there is a certain level where you say you can still work a lot on that day, but you do not produce anything anymore. You do not produce anything anymore, which is useful in any way. Working a lot does not mean that the quality of your work is constantly on a very high level. You have to find the right spot where you say, from this point onwards, we probably should continue tomorrow. I should now have my time off. I should now end my work here, because a lot of work, the quantity of work, does not mean that the quality of work goes on in a linear way and has a correlation in a linear way that you work more and produce more quality work, quality results. That's not the case, as we all know. And now we have to see, well, how to do it better. We have to look at it. And of course, what we should do first is you need very clear regulation. Very clear regulation means that it has to be done in writing. And in writing means the minimum is an email. When your leaders deny to put any rules in writing, I can tell you there's a reason for that. And the reason often is they are fully aware of the fact that what they do is either morally unacceptable or simply illegal if they would put it in writing, and they don't want to give you this email. However, when they don't want to put it in writing and they expect you to work harder and harder, more and more over hours not paid, not only is this a catastrophic approach to leadership, you also, as a leader, create a very high employee turnover, damaging the organization's not only reputation, but also productivity by a high employee turnover, a low employer attractivity, and it gets very challenging to find anyone to work with for you in the future, because what you do very quickly is known on the market. People talk to each other, and I can tell that to you from my own circumstances. One of my closest friends, an engineer, highly qualified, so he has a profile which is high in demand, focusing on renewable energy, so a very high in demand profile. And when he applied for a new job, because he wanted to go from where he's team lead to department lead, and he wanted to change organization to see something new, he was not really dissatisfied, but he wasn't happy with how work and working hours were handled in the organization he worked. And it is shocking to see how many organizations are unable to answer the question, what about working time? We all know, and he's fully aware of it as well, we all know that there are clients and clients have demands. However, we also know that every demand has a certain service time. I'll just give you a very simple example. When you have a certain demand in the local bakery and you decide you want to have it at the local bakery at 1 a.m. in the morning, you will find very few bakeries being open at 1 a.m. in the morning, especially when you want to have high quality bakery work, pure and real craftsmanship. So they very clearly say we are open from that time to that time. So why is it so difficult that we don't see that in free enterprise? You often ask, what about working hours? And quite a number of organizations gave answers which sounded like, well, it is 45 hours plus. However, it's client demand, so we have to deal with it. So there was basically no limit to working hours, 45 hours plus, giving no limit, no regulation. And also you're competing when it comes to talent, with regards to talent, you're competing with other organizations. And other organizations very clearly said, oh, yes, we have agreements with clients. And the agreement says on the phone, you should be available from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have VIP clients in very few projects where you don't have to work, but you can volunteer to do so. They have an extended agreement, which sometimes means that you sometimes have to be available on certain days from 7 a.m. in the morning. Maybe in some days you start a bit later, but you're then available on the phone or via email and answer very quickly. That's the agreement we have until 6 p.m. But they could give a very clear picture. But what's the reason why so many organizations fail to do so? And by the way, work is work, and that also means it's working time, and working time gets paid. So when you think that working time is something which is just there and can be expected, and when people have their working phone with them, they just do whatever they do, and there's no record of what they did. That goes well up to the point where you have a major conflict with someone, and then they decide to leave the organization. Then they say they now want to have the overhours paid. You deny that, and that goes to court. Everything which is done today, sending emails, doing phone calls, it is very well documented on a digital level. So you can't make it disappear. It's very easy for people to show how long they worked in your organization. And that's why you should take care about having a proper regulation, a proper rule, a proper agreement right now. And of course, now some people might ask, hey, Niels, you're self-employed, you're working a lot, and especially people who know me better, I am very much available nearly 24/7 for all my clients. When you email me or send me a WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal or Threema or whichever app you use, or Facebook Messenger or Instagram Messenger, I'm pretty much answering within a couple of hours every single day of the morning, every single day of the year. And yes, here's the point. Self-employment means I decided to do that. And also when I do that, there's an immediate connection between me working more and me earning more money, having a higher income, which gives me certain options. It's not that I do that and nothing happens on the other side of the game. There's an immediate financial gain for me to work more. And I can decide how much work I want to do. Of course, there's self-motivation, motivation from other people around you, and of course, the amount of money you make, the amount of money you want to make, the amount of money you need, and the amount of money that actually says, for you, this is enough, and I have everything I need. I don't need to work more. I don't want to work more, and I also don't need to make more money. When now people, by the way, come up with, oh, I see people volunteering somewhere, working 12, 14-hour shift, and in our organization, they claim it's too much. Well, volunteering, as the word says, is they volunteered to do so. Maybe the voluntary work is just more thankful. They are more appreciated. There is more reward for them. When people are able to work 10, 12, 14 hours in volunteering and deny to do so for you, that's a very clear piece of feedback that you should deal with, because it's not their fault, it's your fault. When they say in your organization, I only work literally the amount of minutes we define in the contract. When people do not go any extra mile, the reason often is bad leadership, no appreciation, bad payment. There are often countless reasons within the organization that are, by the way, in most cases, publicly known, but also publicly and regularly ignored. Of course, now some people might say, well, with all the aspects we now talked about, isn't there anything where we can say, hey, that's a best practice from the industry, we just use that? And yes, there is a best practice from the industry. And surprisingly, in this time, in this case, IT goes all the way. IT shows how to do it, because IT, as you know, is a 24/7 availability service. Because when I ask you, when can IT be unavailable, you will say, never. We always need our IT in the organization. And that's why decades ago, IT had the topic of how do we deal with working hours and working time. And that's why they have a best practice called ITIL, or ITIL, as many people say in the UK. And now we talk about, and now it is not about the wording. So don't be confused about the wording or the abbreviations. It is not about that you have to call it exactly the same way. It's about the content. Call it however you like. The whole best practice approach is not about the wording. You can name it anything you like as long as you apply the principle. So the first of these three aspects is SLAs. And some of you might know SLAs, service level agreements. Service level agreements clearly define which service is available under which circumstances to which times. And this contract can be a very short agreement via email or can be a lengthy contract, defines everything you need to know. Which communication means, what are the times of availability, what is the reaction time, what is the solution time, etc., etc. And these service level agreements are often used even within the organization, although factually it could be called, it should be called slightly different, but that's not the point here. When you have service level agreements in place, you know what is the service defined and how it should be available within the organization, or even more, and that's what service level agreements normally are meant for, external clients. By the way, the IT sees their own employees, people who work within an organization, use IT services, they see them as clients and customers. Rightly so, because IT is a service for the organization, which is why you use SLA, service level agreements, to define which services are available. So when you call the IT help desk, be sure when you have a reasonably organized organization, then the amount of hours they are available from that time to that time has been defined in the first place. And it's a very clear definition of which phone numbers to use, not to use direct dial, only use the central phone number. It's called a single point of contact, the Spock principle, etc., etc. Although when we go exactly by definition, when you have an agreement within the organization, it should be called OLA, operational level agreement. And I know this term isn't frequently used, but when we stick to industry standards, we should know the wording as well, because SLAs are meant to be used with external clients. OLAs are meant to be used within the organization. And when you then have, because I now know that some people might say, well, we can't define it that way, because let's just give a very simple example. Let's say you have a sales team which is at the client side. And they, of course, use notebooks and tablets and need all their IT available because they have to deal with clients. And maybe it's satisfactory when you say from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., the service desk at the IT should be available. And now, of course, some people might say, wait, our sales team gets up 6 a.m. in the morning, and when they have tech issues at 7 a.m. in the morning, they need help when they have presentation at 9 a.m. And maybe something at the client side takes a bit longer. So you can't say 4 p.m., we need 6 p.m. And that's why you have another piece, which is called UC, underpinning contract, where, for example, departments or certain parts of clients can say, we need an extended service, or even vice versa, we need a reduced service. And by the way, all these agreements mean that the services get paid. You want more, you get more. And this is why they work so brilliantly well and made it to global industry standard. Because these agreements, and by the way, you don't need to make lengthy paper contracts. You can do it that way if you want to. And many organizations do, believe me, because they want to be on the safe side legally. However, often when you talk internally with other people, a simple email with an agreement will do. But if you do not define the availability within your organizations, you run into issues which, when things go really wrong, and especially in times of crisis, they can go easily. They easily can go very wrong. When they go wrong, they go really wrong. And then you quickly find yourself in court quicker than you expected and quicker than you ever wanted to see you there, because probably you didn't want to see you there at all. Define what the services are, and the 24/7 availability issue suddenly gets solved quicker than you think. Of course, I publish more about that. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, you then find a page where you can put your email address in. Every Wednesday morning, you then receive an email where everything that I publish is available, of course, free of charge for anyone on this list. And of course, when you say, well, I have a couple of questions about this because we have this issue, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com, and we take it from there, free of charge. Let's have a chat. When, of course, you say, hey, we basically need someone defining that for us. So we need someone who's either doing training or professional speaking, coaching, consulting, mentoring, or even someone for a bit more long-term project interim management. Let me know, nb@nb-networks.com. But also, I'm very happy just to have a chat with you, and we take it from there. The most important aspect now is apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change that because you are listening to this podcast, because you're interested in positive change, you will only see this positive change happening when you apply what you just heard in exactly your organization. I wish you all the best implementing these changes in your organization. And for this week, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.